None of this was inevitable. None of this was a surprise. What is happening in Puerto Rico is the product of centuries of decisions made within a destructive system. We've known this for centuries thanks in large part to the people whose voices were too often deemed dangerous or unworthy of our attention. Scientists are now certain that our use of fossil fuels and our destruction of the planet's ecosystems are quickly bringing the future of human civilization into doubt. My goal with this book is to help you imagine your own part in building a better world that works for everyone, regardless of status or class or gender, and to remind you that you were born at exactly the same right time to help change everything. Because we refuse to take actions for decades, climate change is no longer just about science. It is now at heart an issue of justice. The fact that each year we are continuing to set new record highs in greenhouse gas emissions, even as our planet is rapidly warming, is a shocking symptom of a larger problem in the way our society is structured. An issue of justice, climate change is also a living emergency that touches everyone and every part of society, which makes it impossible to disentangle in any meaningful way the effects of increasingly extreme weather and the unfair system that caused it. The evidence is all around us. We need to embark rapidly on a different path. But how? The Latin root of the word disaster means ill started. The Latin root of the word disaster means ill starred, disaster, literally a malevolent omen from the heavens. Okay, but climate change related disasters are no longer a matter of bad luck. We have tilted the odds toward catastrophe, particularly in the places that did the least to cause the problem. Okay, meteorology has advanced to the point that we can now predict when and where disasters will take place. We also know that due to the way our society is structured, the most economically and socially vulnerable parts of the planet will bear the brunt of these disasters. The people like the survivors of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, who too often experience the worst of the injustices of history. ठीक है, मतलब कि जैसे फॉसिल फ्यूल ज़्यादा कहाँ बर्न हो रहा है, जैसे दुबई में बर्न हो रहा है, बट या फिर चाइना में बर्न हो रहा है, या फिर मान इंडिया के शहरों में बर्न हो रहा है, या फिर मान लो और जो न्यूली इंडस्ट्रियलाइज नेशंस हैं उनमें बर्न हो रहा है. बट जो टेम्परेचर बढ़ेगा उसे सी लेवल राइज होगा, या फिर जो हीट वेव्स है उसकी वजह से लोग बीमार होंगे, उनको प्रॉब्लम होगी, वो देश वो वाले वो उसकी वजह से सबसे ज़्यादा नुकसान होगा गरीब लोगों को, क्योंकि गरीब लोग के पास एसी नहीं है. ठीक है, और जो लो लाइंग एरियाज़ में रह रहे हैं उनके घर डूब जाएंगे. तो जिन लोगों ने धरती को ख़राब करने में लीस्ट भूमिका अदा करी है, उन लोगों को क्लाइमेट चेंज का सबसे ज़्यादा खामियाजा भुगतना पड़ेगा. टुडे क्लाइमेट चेंज कंपाउंड्स natural disasters, giving people less time to recover because they are plunged back into crisis mode. Residents of small islands like Puerto Rico already face limited resources for fresh water. ठीक है. A 2018 study found that drought in Caribbean is increasing in severity even as hurricanes grow stronger and downpours get more intense, and this compounding of social and climate emergencies is happening all over the world every single year. ठीक है भाई. क्लाइमेट चेंज कंपाउंड्स नेचुरल डिजास्टर्स. ठीक है, एक आया, फिर दूसरा आया, तीसरा आया. ठीक है, एक से ऊपर नहीं है कि दूसरा आ गया. In 2016, the year before Maria, on the other side of the world, Cyclone Winston rapidly strengthened to the most powerful storm ever measured in the southern hemisphere, just hours before its landfall in Fiji. ठीक है भाई. In an address to the nation following the storm, Fijian President Georgi Conrod vowed that the country would do whatever is in its power to persuade the global community about the root cause, climate change. This is a fight we must win, he said. Our, en- our entire way of life is at stake, years after landfall. As recovery drags on rainy season after rainy season, schools and families are still housed in government issued tents. ठीक है. Our entire way of life is at stake. Years after landfall, as recovery drags on, rainy season after rainy season, schools and families are still housed. Okay. In 2017, just a few days before Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, another hurricane tore through the Caribbean. Hurricane Irma, the strongest hurricane ever to make landfall anywhere in the Atlantic Ocean, hit the island of Barbuda with winds of up to 185 miles per hour. It demolished 90% of the island. The entire population fled, leaving the island completely uninhabited for the first time in hundreds of years. By law and tradition, land on the islands is owned communally by its residents. But in the wake of the storm, private developers are now trying to pressure the government to change the law in order to encourage more tourism. In 2018, Typhoon U2 hit Saipan, the largest island in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Island, US territory. With 180 mile per hour winds, it was the strongest storm in the history of Mariana Islands. Before this storm, Saipan had been one of the world's fastest growing tourist destinations, but its casino, a primary draw, has struggled to remain profitable since U2 struck, and the government has had to scale back its recovery efforts. This includes the reconstruction of its schools. ठीक है भाई, मतलब कैरिबियन आइलैंड पे साइक्लोन आ रहे हैं ज़्यादा. Cyclone Idai and Cyclone Kenneth struck Mozambique in 2019 within 6 weeks of each other. The country endured back-to-back landfalls at major hurricane force for the first time in recorded history. Idai would have been bad enough. The UN called it one of the worst weather-related disasters in the southern hemisphere, but Kenneth proved to be the strongest storm ever to make landfall in mainland Africa. International relief efforts gathered only 25% of the necessary funds during the storm's immediate aftermath. To cover the gap and finance its own recovery, Mozambique was forced to take out millions of dollars of loan from the International Monetary Fund. These disasters disproportionately harm women, the disabled, low-income, black and indigenous communities, all of which have been marginalized for historical and contemporary reasons. In 2018, when Hurricane Michael tore through Florida and Georgia, it was just the fourth Category 5 hurricane landfall in US history. The areas most affected are some of the poorest part of the country, impoverished counties of southern Georgia and Florida Panhandle, which have been scarred by centuries of racism and slavery. Instead of bringing attention to these communities in the aftermath of Michael, most of the media coverage focused on billions of dollars worth of ruined fighter planes at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. ठीक है भाई, ये बात सही बोली इसने कि disasters disproportionately harm women, disabled, low income, black and indigenous communities, all of which have been क्योंकि उनके पास रिसोर्सेज नहीं है उनको बेयर करने के लिए, तो वो उनके हमेशा मार्जिन पे रहते हैं. तो डिज़ास्टर इतना खतरनाक आता है तो मार्जिन से भी हटा दिया जाता है उनको. ठीक है गाइस, सी यू इन द नेक्स्ट पार्ट.